The Manhattan Project was a top-secret research program launched by the United States during World War II to develop the world's first nuclear weapons. The project was initiated in response to the fear that Nazi Germany would develop atomic weapons first, and the United States desired to gain an advantage in the war. Let me now provide some context for how the project came to be. Physicists all over the world began to discover the potential power of atomic energy in the 1930s. They discovered that by splitting an atom's nucleus, they could release a massive amount of energy, potentially enough to create a weapon with unprecedented destructive power. By 1940, it was clear that Nazi Germany was actively working on developing an atomic bomb, and many scientists and politicians in the United States were deeply concerned about the consequences. They understood that if the Germans were successful, the war and democracy as we know it would be over. As a result, in 1941, a group of scientists led by physicist Leo Szilard, who had fled Nazi Germany, began lobbying the U.S. government to fund nuclear weapons research. They sent letters to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him of the dangers and urging him to act. Roosevelt was persuaded, and in 1942 he authorized the establishment of the Manhattan Project, a top-secret research program aimed at developing nuclear weapons before the Germans. That, my friends, is how the Manhattan Project began. It was a race against the clock to create a weapon that could change the course of history. And it all began with a group of scientists and politicians who saw the potential power of atomic energy and knew they needed to act quickly. 1939, physicists in Germany discover the potential power of atomic energy and begin to research nuclear fission. 1940, the U.S. government begins to worry that Nazi Germany may develop an atomic bomb and formulates a plan to investigate the possibility. 1941, physicist Leo Szilard and other scientists write a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him of the potential dangers of atomic weapons and urging him to fund research into nuclear weapons. June 28, 1941, Roosevelt creates the Office of Scientific Research and Development, OSRD, which becomes responsible for the development of the atomic bomb. August 2, 1942, the Manhattan Engineer District is established to manage the project, with General Leslie Groves appointed as director and physicist Robert Oppenheimer as scientific director. September 1942. Construction begins on the first atomic reactor at the University of Chicago. 1943, work begins on three major facilities for the production of fissile material, the Y-12 electromagnetic plant in Tennessee, the K-25 gaseous diffusion plant in Tennessee, and the Hanford Engineer Works in Washington State. July 16, 1945, the first atomic bomb is successfully tested in Alamogordo, New Mexico. August 6, 1945, the U.S. drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, killing an estimated 70,000 people. August 9, 1945, the U.S. drops a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki, Japan, killing an estimated 40,000 people. August 15, 1945, Japan announces its surrender, effectively ending World War II. So you see, the development of the Manhattan Project was a complex and multi-stage process that involved many different people, facilities, and technologies. It all began with a group of scientists who saw the potential power of atomic energy and knew that they had to act fast to develop a weapon before the Germans could. Over the course of several years, the project grew to involve thousands of people and billions of dollars, culminating in the successful testing and deployment of the world's first atomic bombs. The Manhattan Project was one of the most top-secret scientific endeavors in history, and it's not hard to see why. The goal was to develop the first atomic bomb, and the stakes were incredibly high. If the wrong people found out about it, it could have been catastrophic. To keep things under wraps, the U.S. government went to great lengths to ensure that the project was shrouded in secrecy. The project was divided into different sections, with each team only given access to the information they needed to complete their specific task. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle without seeing the big picture. But that wasn't enough. The government also spread disinformation and rumors to mislead potential spies and detractors. They even gave the project a misleading name, the Manhattan Engineer District, to throw people off the scent. In addition to all of this, they required everyone working on the project to sign a secrecy oath and undergo background checks to ensure that they weren't a security risk. Anyone who was deemed a threat to the project's secrecy was immediately removed from the team. And let's not forget about the incident at the Los Alamos laboratory in 1945, when an accident caused the death of scientist Harry Daghlian. The government claimed it was a criticality accident rather than admitting that Daghlian had been working on the atomic bomb. It's like trying to cover up a smoking gun with a flower. Despite all of this, the Manhattan Project was a success. The first atomic bomb was developed and ultimately used to end World War II. The government's secrecy was excessive at times, but it was necessary to ensure that the project was completed without any interference. Yes, the results of the Manhattan Project. They were catastrophic. The explosion at Trinity was like nothing anyone had ever seen before, and it was just the beginning. When Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima, it devastated the city and killed tens of thousands of innocent civilians. And Nagasaki didn't fare any better when Fat Man was dropped on it. The radiation that was released during the detonations caused long-lasting effects on both the environment and the people who lived there. The effects of radiation exposure were poorly understood at the time, so the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project didn't know the full extent of the damage they were causing. But the after-effects of radiation exposure are still felt today, and the long-term health effects of exposure are still being studied and understood. In addition to the bombings themselves, the Manhattan Project also included experiments on the effects of radiation on humans and animals. These experiments were often carried out without the subjects' consent or knowledge, and many of the subjects suffered from serious health problems as a result. The ethical concerns raised by these experiments are still relevant today, and they continue to shape our understanding of science and morality. The legacy of the Manhattan Project is a complex one. On the one hand, it led to the end of World War II and changed the course of history. On the other hand, the use of the atomic bomb and the experiments carried out during the project caused immeasurable human suffering and raised serious ethical concerns. The continued development and stockpiling of nuclear weapons has created a world in which the threat of nuclear war is ever present, and the ethical questions raised by the Manhattan Project continue to shape our understanding of science and politics. Well, folks, that's all for today's show. If you liked what you saw, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. And if you didn't like what you saw, well, too bad. Just kidding, we appreciate all feedback, so leave a comment and let us know what you want to see next. Until then, this is worth keeping in mind, signing off.